All right. Okay, cool. We're live. Awesome. So, hey, everybody. Happy Friday. We have another session for you for the Arweave Open Incubator. And today we're going to be talking about PSTs, so profit sharing tokens, what you guys will be creating. And I know there's been a lot of questions on this topic. And so this is probably the event you guys have been waiting for. So I'm excited to dive in. So during the presentation, feel free to drop any questions into chat. We'll try to get to those as we go along. But yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So Sam, take it away.
Okay, thanks so much everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. I think we've got something pretty exciting and interesting to share with you all today. So let me just share my screen. Okay, so presenting this idea that we call profit sharing communities. They're essentially an extension to the profit sharing token model that we're sort of basing all of our builds around in this incubator to allow communities to build around the applications and then reward people for working to build those applications further in the future. The idea here is to create communities that are better than startups, fundamentally, and making web applications in that they're better for the contributors in terms of the value they gain, the autonomy they gain, and the governance that they gain, as well as also allowing investors to come in and, essentially profit on the things that they build in a more liquid manner than they would in a traditional web startup model. So, startups have essentially built the way that we see the world. When we look at our phones, almost every application there, one way or another, was built by a startup, or the original idea was created by a startup, which was then bought by a large company. But unfortunately, the models that we use for startups today have serious fundamental flaws. So, one of those flaws would be that the value creators in the startup are tied to that startup as a single individual entity. And this is quite bizarre because people often put maybe like 5 to 10 years into a single startup, and they're essentially a single lottery ticket. And it's very unlikely that that startup will ever reach a liquidity event. That just is a fundamentally poor kind of incentive design because it means people are staking too much on a single opportunity. Further, employees own a small amount of their remuneration in equity and ownership relative to what they receive in cash. And this creates very strange incentives inside these organizations, particularly after they hit what's called the Dunbar number. So this idea that there are more than, I think it's 150 or something, people inside an organization, you end up with politics and people's incentives being pushed around furthering their own careers rather than furthering the collective goals of the organization. And part of this is the fundamental misalignment between the equity, between the direction of the company, the startup, and the employees inside it, and as well as the investors. So the investors are buying equity in the company that's being created, and then they're doing so for cash, and that cash is being given to employees broadly. But that means that the incentives of the employees don't necessarily match with the incentives of the investors. Similarly with the founders, it's all just not quite incentive aligned. And further, on top of this, we end up with this situation where employees in the startup almost never receive any kind of governance rights. And this is a really fundamental point. They are creating all of the value and they are receiving no control over where that value goes in the future. Further, typical founders in this kind of startup system spend 1/3 to 2/3 of their time raising money and being distracted from the job that they're best at, which is building the product that they brought to market in the first place. You'll almost never find a founder that says that they enjoy the process of raising money. And I would bet that actually most of them, it's not their best skill either. This is just a fundamental problem because these are the people, like the people in our community right now, hopefully watching this, that are founding their own products, and they know that product so well, and they know the market it's going into so well, their time is best spent focusing on, making that thing as best as possible and producing as much value with it as possible. But in the current startup ecosystem and structure that we have, the founder spends most of their time distracted. Just doesn't make any real sense. Further, eventually governance can end up in the hands of people with short-term and misaligned incentives. So the key example here, I would say, is the rise of private equity in the startup sector. This idea that when a startup gets kind of semi-mature, a large outside private equity group can come and they can purchase, the entire startup essentially, and then just gut it and use it for whatever means they have, which might be completely away from the desires of the founders or the contributors that made the startup good in the first place. And there's really nothing that can be done about that. And worse than the misaligned incentives are the short-term incentives. So the fact that people can come in and gain a large ownership stake, take part in voting and governance decisions, only in the interest of, say, the profit they're going to make in 3 months or 6 months or even less. It's just not a very good way of running things. And then there's the fact that organizational opacity leads to abuses of power. And so we can see this very clearly in the inappropriate behavior stories that we see coming out of the startup world all the time. I think there was major scandals in Uber, as well as Tinder and a whole bunch of other startups fairly recently, where essentially this problem that you end up with these power structures and these very kind of tight-knit groups where there isn't very much visibility from the outside about what they're doing, essentially leading to this situation where people in power in those organizations misuse it. And there's very, very little, disincentive to do so. Like often these instances are just forgotten about or people try and sweep them under the rug. So these are some pretty fundamental problems with a system that has created probably the most value in the economy over the last 50 years at minimum. But we would like to posit that profit-sharing communities can actually solve a lot of these problems. And they're a very simple modification and expansion of what we're talking about with profit-sharing tokens. So just to kind of recap, profit-sharing tokens are this idea that when you build an application, you deploy it to the PermaWeb, it can have an immutable and permanent business model. That business model can send tips when the user interacts with that PermaWeb application relative or to the owners of a profit-sharing token, which the founder creates at the beginning and can then sell. So, for example, if I work with another party at a hackathon and we build some kind of, to-do app or something like this, and people start using it, we can own 50% of the profit-sharing token each, and each time someone adds something to the to-do app, a note, for example, then one of us gets the tip, and it's 50% likely. This is the basic idea of a PST. A profit-sharing community is a simple expansion of this. In essence, the basic principle is that the existing profit-sharing community members can vote to generate more tokens and reward other people in the wider community for working on the application. This could be working building new features, working on marketing, even working on operations to ensure that the application continues to work and continues to grow and generate more tips for the people that own the profit-sharing token inside. Votes in the system are weighted by the number of tokens that each voter holds, multiplied by the time they are willing to lock them. And this is really fundamental because it means that you just remove this problem of short-term governance incentives. Instead, when people want to take part in governance, they have to lock value into the project for a period of time, which incentivizes them to ensure that over that period, the number of tips that they receive, which are essentially dividends, micro dividends associated with user activity on the program, increase. And that subsequently leads them to get a good return. And subsequently, they are incentivized to perform good governance. So this we think is a pretty big deal. It solves most of these problems that we were discussing earlier. Ownership and profits flow directly to the people that create value in the first place, who can then monetize them at any time. So in the previous startup model, what would happen is a founder would go out, typically a founder, and they would raise money from VCs who would give cash to an organization in response or in exchange for equity, which the founders then distribute the cash rather, to the people that have contributed to the project. But this creates a whole bunch of incentive problems, as we've already discussed. So instead, in the profit-sharing community model, what happens is if an investor wants to get involved in the project because they're excited by what the community is creating, they buy the tokens from the people that have created the value. So to go through it again, what happens is someone comes along and they say, hey, I'd really like to build this new feature in your application. I think your application is great. It's worth my time to take part in. I want 0.5% stake in order to build this feature that you would like. And the DAO says, okay, or the community says, okay, cool. We'll vote to essentially authorize that you start work on this. And then you go and produce the work. And then you come back and you say, hey, here it is. And then they vote to say whether or not they accept that the work has been done. And when they vote to say that the work has been accepted, they are essentially generating new tokens for you. And that's the only way new tokens can get into the system. So after the new tokens are in the system, then the contributor owns the profit sharing token dividends that are flowing through the system as users just take part in activity on the application. And also they can then use that to take part in governance. But if they don't want to do that, they can take it to some kind of exchange. And we'll get to this in a second, where they can trade it for other tokens or essentially cash value to investors that would like to take part in the project. So in the first instance, the ownership and the profits are going to the people that are creating the value. It's a fundamentally different approach to startups. Further, the governance rights are also going to the people that created the value first. And then if they want to monetize them, the governance power essentially stays with the people that are willing to stake to lock their stake in the project for a long period of time. And this creates interesting dynamics where people are incentivized to compete with each other to stake for longer. So imagine I've got, 25,000 of these tokens, and somebody else in the profit sharing community has 50,000. But I'm staking for 1 year and they're staking for half a year. Well, then now our voting stakes are actually the same. And this means that when we're taking part in governance decisions, my voice matters just as much because I believe in the long term of this project and I'm willing to stake that value for a longer period of time. Then what happens is that the other person is actually incentivized. Well, I own a larger piece of this, so why don't I just commit a little bit longer to take part in the community for a longer period of time, and in doing so I can increase my voting stake. And they're incentivized to compete with each other in a similar mechanism to proof of work mining to stake for as long as possible. And what this means is it's really a kind of evolution of the crypto community approach. People are encouraged to gain a stake and then to compete with one another to become staked in for as long as possible and subsequently dependent upon the success of the project. And we believe that when people become dependent on the success of the project, their incentive is strong enough to perform good governance and ensure its success over the long term. I think this is a fundamentally different approach. So, value created by contributors is also immediately liquid, and founders can focus on product, not fundraising. So when you think about this relative to a traditional startup, as we said, 95% fail without any kind of liquidity event. This is just the exact inverse of profit-sharing communities. You perform a small piece of work for a profit-sharing community, and you can liquidate it immediately, or you can hold it. And also, because of the way the communities are structured, it's not like you gain a job and you stay there and your labor is essentially illiquid. So you have some kind of leaving time. You can't leave without giving your notice for 6 weeks or something like this. You're working on a job-by-job basis on the projects that you believe in. And if you stop believing in the project, you simply stop working on it. And this incentivizes the projects and communities to make their applications great for people to take part in. Again, completely different approach, and it leads to totally different outcomes. The value they create is liquid today, and they can essentially realize that, and they can also be liquid about the allocation of their own personal resources. It gives far greater amounts of personal freedom, and also better, and we think, fairer distribution of rewards within the startup system. Finally, the lack of power structures in this system essentially avoids a lot of the problems that you might end up with abuses of power. So we can see that these are essentially going to be online communities, just like we're building today with Arweave, and indeed, I think, with Opala and some of the other projects that are taking part in the Open Web Incubator, they're already building their own kind of communities. But these happen in public over the internet. So people have pseudonyms, and so bias is less expressed within the system. And also, there is transparency about what is happening and how decisions are made. This lowers the potential for abuse in the system, making better places for people to work and to spend their lives. Finally, this is pretty cool, but as yet not completely explored. And so I think this leaves a lot of avenues open for people to, in the community, kind of take what we've been thinking about and then take it even further. So staking and slashing in these communities essentially allow you to have trustable, decentralized backends for your application that are built in any language and tool stack that you like. And this sounds like a pretty big claim if you're sort of aware of the technological side of crypto, but we'll get into how this works with a live example in just a second, actually. So this is the idea of profit-sharing communities, which again, just a small addition on top conceptually of what profit-sharing tokens are, but in terms of what they allow you to do, they really magnify the scope, you could say. But it's not just theory. This is real and it's practice. We've already been working with members of the community, who we're about to speak to in a second, to build most of the core pieces of infrastructure that will be necessary to make this ecosystem a reality and also to flourish. So, at the core of all of this is an upgraded PST contract that we call community contract. Community contract is, if you're kind of aware of the crypto-y language, it's just a profit-sharing token plus a DAO. And the DAO just allows you to mint more tokens, as we discussed, and also take part in indicative votes and stake, and slash the tokens that are held within the within the contract, which is of course running on top of SmartWeave, just like profit-sharing tokens. One thing to note about this is that a community contract is a direct drop-in replacement for a PST contract. So if you've been using a PST in your OpenWeb Incubator application, you can just update the address that you're pointing to a community contract, and everything continues to work just fine. And you also get all of these features that we're about to speak about. So on top of this, of course, we need somewhere to govern these autonomous organizations. And that's where I'd like to bring Cedric. So, Cedric, can you tell us about community.xyz, please?
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, so this is the first part of what Sam was talking about. So the dashboard where you create your communities and where you can also manage them. So create mint tokens, burn the tokens or slash them. And also you have a voting system on top of it to be able to vote for the minting, for the burning, and all of that. So here is the main dashboard. You can see the amount of community members that you have, the amount of the tokens that you have minted, how many are waiting in votes, the locked amount of tokens, and also the active votes that we have right now. So this is the first page. You can log in, you can log out. Here is the second one, tokens. This is all live, in fact. So I can just go here and do that. But just to make sure, since sometimes the network could take a few seconds to interact with the service, I just created many tabs here, so it's faster. Here on the tokens tab, you have the tokens name, the total supply, and you have your own balance, so you know how much you have. This is the balance that is currently unlocked, so it's not in a vault. This means that this balance doesn't have any weight when you do a vote. You can see your token holders, so the community members, and their balances and the vote balance they have. Here you can see also the top holders. It's going to show the top 5 ones. So here and here it's a very little one. I can't even see. Oh, there. Almost 0 because he has 0 balance right now. Okay, let's go to the vote. Before creating a vote or voting on the platform, you need to lock a few tokens, sorry. So you can do it here. You can lock your tokens. And when the lock time ends, you can unlock your vote, and it's gonna check for all of them that have been ended, and then it will be returned to your balance. And also here you can see the vote weight that you have compared to others. So right now here, I have 25%, even if I set 100 here, just because of the length I decided to put on it. So here is the vote page. Here is a little notification that a new vote has been created. So let me close that. Here we can see the different types of votes that we can create. So proposals, in fact. You can see who has voted on them. You can see for this one, for example, the quorum failed, so it wasn't met. So even if he voted yes, it didn't work. Well, that's me, in fact. And you can create new votes here. You can create votes for minting, mint locked, burnt vote, so to slash a vote from someone. Set a few keys, for example, the quorum, the support, the minimum lock length, and maximum lock length for the vote, and a role. So users are able to have roles also. And you can have also a simple indicative question, just to ask yes or no, and get a result from the community. So let me try to refresh the page here. Hope it doesn't take too much. Just to show something else that we have in this page. Okay, here, for example, you can see that you can also see the progress. So how long it will take for this vote to end. For example, this vote will end in 7 blocks. These ones are in gray because the vote has ended already. So you aren't able to vote yes or no. You are able to finalize it to make it true. So to validate it, and then it's gonna or pass or fail with one of the errors, for example, for the quorum failed one. Yeah, so that's the dashboard itself.
Cedric was showing us, the work there on community.xyz, which is a really amazing tool. I hope you can hear me, Cedric. Thank you very much for showing us that. It's a very exciting way that you can, essentially administrate these decentralized communities building applications. I think one of the, I'm not sure whether Cedric said this, but this is worth going into. This is actually, you can access it today, essentially. And you can go make yourself a contract. And if you're already working on a profit sharing token, you can just swap that profit sharing token out for this community contract. And this community.xyz site will give you a transaction ID. You can swap that transaction ID for the old PST that you're using, and it'll continue to work as normal. But now you can access all of these new features. So if I can just share my screen again. Okay, there we go. Okay, great. So this is the system through which you can administrate community contracts. So that's cool. But of course, after the community has minted new tokens for people essentially producing work for the wider community and the applications that it's supporting, then they need somewhere to trade those tokens. And that takes us to a very interesting project by Tate, a member of the community that's also working on the Nestland application with his team. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been building?
All right, so let's see. We have a short presentation prepared. So let me see if I can share my screen and get that up. It should be this. Okay. Can you guys see the screen now?
We can.
Yep.
Alrighty. Okay, so I'm in presentation mode, but is this the wrong screen?
I think it might be the wrong screen, but just go with it. It's okay. Don't worry.
All right, cool. So my name's Tate, and I am a part of the team behind Verdo, which is going to be a decentralized PST exchange for Arweave. So as you all know, there are a ton of great PST projects a part of this open web incubator, including OpenBits, Rdrive, Evermore Data Store, Reeve, Zon Directory, and many more. But you know, people are making all of these PSTs, but there's nowhere to exchange them right now. And so there are a few like questions and issues for this specific use case, because getting listed on a traditional exchange is normally a very expensive process, and all the exchanges are centralized, so they could choose to delist your token, or you're at their mercy essentially. And so the team and I would like to introduce Verdo, which is a completely decentralized exchange. It's governed by a DAO, a PST DAO on top of Arweave. And there's going to be no high cost of entry for PSTs to be listed, and you only need an Arweave wallet to use the exchange. So yeah, and I have a short demo prepared, so let's see if I can show that. Let me drag it into the window. All right. Can you guys see this screen?
Yes, yes, we can.
Awesome. All right. So this is the website, Verdo. It's a decentralized token exchange. This is what the homepage looks like. So you can see your latest trades. Well, sorry, the latest trades that went on as a part of the exchange. A little bit of information about PSTs and what Verdo is. As I said before, you can sign in with your Arweave wallet, so you just need that key file. And then here's your dashboard. So you can see the total balance of R that you currently have along with your wallet address. And you'll also be able to see all of your assets. So you can see all of this information. You'll be able to see the exchanges that you've made in the past, along with some status indicators to make sure that everything's going as planned. You can also view all of your exchanges. And you can view all of your transactions. So we're still working on getting all of these aspects to be dynamic. Transactions is one of the first that is dynamic now. It's still under development, but this is what it's going to look like. So these are all of my transactions that I've made, and you can also view all of them. And let's see. Now the cool part comes with the posts. So in the trading post page, you can see all of the trading posts that are listed. Now, this is the part of the exchange that, in my opinion, is the coolest, because anybody can go to our GitHub repository and spin up their own trading post. They can clone the code, configure it just how they want, and spin up their own trading posts. So there are a few aspects to trading posts. I think Sam and I could maybe get into more detail after I give the demo. But firstly, you've got your wallet address here of the trading post, along with the reputation. The reputation is going to show how trustworthy the trading post is, and that'll be based on the amount that you have staked, that trading post has staked, and the amount of time that it's going to be staked. And you can also click on a trading post to get more information about it. So you can see the trading post's current balance, and you can also see the transactions that have occurred on the trading post, and the PST that the transactions have been a part of. So you can also see the assets that the trading post currently has and supports. So here are just a few random examples. And that's what that would look like. So then let's say, I don't know, this is a good reputation for me. I want to trade with this trading post. You click the Trade Now button, and this is the page where you can make your trade. So the algorithm is going to recommend a trading post to you, but you can also pick your own, based off of that posts tab. So on this page, you can see your balance and all of the tokens that you have. And you can also make selections and choose how much you want to send and receive of a given PST. And then after that, you just click exchange, and it pops up a confirmation modal, and you can just click confirm. And then that's that. After that, you'll be taken back to your dashboard where this new exchange pops up, and you can see it as pending. So yeah, that's the demo. Let me go back to the presentation really quick. All right, thanks everybody for listening to this. If you want to get in touch with us, you can go to our Discord at chat.verdo.exchange. And this is my contact information. And so yeah, that's Verdo.
Wow, thanks for showing this. Yeah, to speak to, I think actually Peter from the chat just sort of asked a question that we were going to touch on, which is like, are these independent exchanges? And the answer is like, well, you can tell us how the infrastructure works.
Sure. So technically, they're completely independent exchanges that are receiving PST and R from the site, and then they're making matches with other transactions that they've received. Now, a reputation is needed because this code is centralized, so somebody is going to run this code on their own server. But in order to prevent cheating, we've introduced staking, which essentially is our way of holding a trading post accountable for any malicious action that they may have. So let's say somebody wants to modify the code and make the trading post just steal all the money, you know? Well, in order to be a trading post with a good reputation, you have to have a lot of R staked. So let's say something happens and a trading post becomes malicious. In that instance, the DAO will vote whether or not to slash the stake of that trading post. And if the stake is slashed, the trading post is done for, because that money is now ours, and we can redistribute that to anyone who did not receive their the transaction that they were supposed to. So yeah,
super fascinating. I think this mechanism. What's really interesting is what's going on. Okay, so they're independent exchanges, kind of, apart from that they're governed by this meta structure that puts in place the rules of engagement. And so anyone that has the regulatory authority, essentially, or regulatory can be compliant in their local jurisdiction, can start one of these exchanges, and then they are regulated on top by this DAO that makes sure that they're essentially offering a good service to their users, which is a really powerful mechanism. It's amazing to see it in practice. I think this could be extended to many, many things. In fact, what's perhaps most cool about this is that actually that backend tape, if I'm right, is just written in JavaScript. It's just normal JavaScript. Yeah, but because of the staking and slashing mechanism, you can make sure that the code that is being run, even for something like an exchange, is being executed properly. So, yeah, I think that's an amazing achievement, an amazing thing to see in the wild, in the ecosystem. I think people are going to build fantastic stuff on top of that. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Aidan, are you perhaps ready to show us the situation with the governance forums?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
We can indeed hear you.
Great. So yeah, Cedric has built this amazing community.xyz site that you can vote and mint and so on. But community members are still going to need a place to discuss governance decisions, discuss what work needs to be done, what features need to be done, and so on. So we're also building a decentralized forum where people can do these things. I'll quickly share my screen and show you a little demo of it. So there's actually two parts to this. Can you see my screen? Oop.
We can.
There's two parts to this. The first part is a membership-only forum for holders in the PST community. They want to be able to discuss things, and they don't particularly like. They want to be able to have a forum where only they can post and reply to things. Other people can view this forum, but only the current holders can actually post and discuss things. So once you've created your community with community.xyz, you can come here and you can create a forum for it. So we're just going to create a forum for an app called the Incredible To Do app. And we just give it the contact address, create forum, and we post the first announcement post. And there's their announcement post. I'll show you some of the previous ones I just created earlier. This set of forums itself is, of course, a PST community-backed app, so it has its own forum, as does Community XYZ. So the PST holders can just basically discuss here what they want done. At the moment, this is still under development, and we're going to have tighter integration with the community.xyz site and with the community.xyz SDK. So you'll potentially be able to view the status of votes here, even see the vote, or even create the vote from the forum while you discuss it. And in general, much tighter integration with the community XYZ and other parts of the ecosystem too. So that's basically like the membership only forums. The other very important part is a job board. So a job board will be a public forum where the PSD communities can post job offers for work done, development work, marketing work, in exchange for PST tokens, in exchange for equity in the community. So they'll be able to just post up a job description. All of the communities will post in the same place, so people can come along, they can see all of the offerings, and they can decide who to work for. There'll also be an area where people can post up their resume or their skills or offers to work. People from outside the community may want to come along and suggest a feature or proposal for a particular app. So the job board would be a place where all of that kind of stuff happens.
Amazing.
So, yeah, that's another piece of the ecosystem which will help people organize and grow the PSD communities.
Thanks so much, Aiden. Oh, I think I stopped screen sharing before. There we go. Thank you. So this is essentially the ecosystem. Someone comes along and they found a new organization backing a new PermaWeb application, and they can start giving people stakes in it. They can offer jobs and work for other people to take up if they're excited by the mission of the application on the job board. And then they can talk to other people that are now staked into the governance of that application using a special private forum just for profit sharing token holders. But what's really cool about this is it's people that are owning the token can speak, but everyone else can view. And so when we think back to that idea of transparency, or rather opacity of normal startups leading to dubious behavior by some of the people involved, it just doesn't really happen here because everything is open, it's on the internet, and everyone can judge what everyone else is saying. And there's no essentially secrecy that can lead to these abuses of power. And then on top of this, when people think the time is right and they would like to liquidate some of the stake that they've gained by working for these communities, they can then trade them on a system in the network. And what's really exciting about all of this, I think, is it's pretty much complete. We're trying to make sure that all of this stuff launches by the end of the incubator next week. And B, all of it is self-hosted on the PermaWeb and indeed backed by profit-sharing communities. So if you saw anything that seems kind of exciting to you today, well, just check back next week, and basically on the job board, you'll be able to see posts about how you can get involved and help those applications and earn a stake in them yourselves. And this is just the beginning. We think that basically most of the applications in the incubator can go with this approach. So one final thing to note is, okay, so you've got to make a differentiation between just a standard profit-sharing token application and a profit-sharing community. Which should you choose? I say the broad principle is that if the application is completely done, you're not going to need to work on it anymore, and it has a sufficient community around it to sustain it, then you want to use a profit-sharing token. And the reason for that, or pure profit-sharing token contract, and the reason for that is that it has a fixed supply. So when people buy that token, they can know that they're not going to be diluted. And that in itself is a feature. But if you have an application which needs other people's support and input to grow, then you probably want to use a profit-sharing community. And again, they are, at the API level, they are compatible. So if you've been building on a PST so far, you can swap it out for a profit-sharing community, and it doesn't change your code at all. You can just access all of the features of this new ecosystem that's being built. The final thing to note is that today we've basically presented one model for how this could work. And it really is just one model. All of this code, like for all of these applications, is completely open source. You can just pick it up and hack on it. and change it so that essentially the way that you think that your organization should be governed is the way that it is governed. And it's completely flexible, and anyone can take part. And we would love to see a plethora of different, essentially, mechanisms that are running these organizations. And as long as you keep the same API of the community contract in place, then you can have whatever you want going on in the back end. You can change how voting scores are calculated, how the locking works, how tokens are issued even. Really, all of it is up for grabs. Yeah, so we're just super excited to see what people build in the community. And finally, I would like to thank Tate, Cedric, and Aidan so much for taking part in this presentation. Yeah, it's really been amazing to see how the kind of community that's been, or the sub part of the community that's been involved in this has pulled together and built such cool things over the last few weeks. And I just can't wait to see what the wider Arweave community does with it. Thanks, everyone.